This video review goes out to Lumix S9 owners in particular, but it's also valid for anyone with an L mount camera. This is the TTArtisan 40mm f2 prime lens. This is small, lightweight, it's affordable, and it has autofocus motors inside it. So we're going to test it out. I'm shooting this video on the Lumix S9 today with the 35mm f1.8 prime. So this is a very similar focal length and very similar aperture. We're going to do a comparison, see how they compare. Let's get into it. Here's some video samples shot with the Lumix S9 at different frame rates and resolutions, shooting in Vlog, and it's color graded in post-production. Here's some photographs shot with the Lumix S9 and the TTArtisan 40mm f2. The results here look great, and these are all just straight out of camera JPEGs. Before we get into this video, just a quick disclaimer, this lens has been provided by TTArtisan. They don't get to preview this video ahead of time, and all thoughts, as always, are my own, and I'll run through the pros and cons of this while we test it out. First up, let me share with you what we get in the box. All right, here's the box right here. You can see by the size of the box that the lens itself is going to be quite small, which is awesome. We get an instruction manual here. We get a warranty card, and here's the lens. It's usually wrapped in that piece of plastic, but I've already used it. So yeah, that's what the lens looks like right here. Now, if you're looking at this lens going, hey, it's not as small as I thought, a lot of the size is taken up with this rear lens cap, which is also the way that you update the firmware. So you connect everything to the computer via USB-C, plug it in, it will show up as a drive, and you can drag and drop new firmware in. It's that easy, which is awesome. So if you take this off, look how small this lens is. It's actually smaller than a lot of micro 4/3 lenses. Here's a quick look at the size comparison between the 50mm f1.8 prime lens and the TTArtisan 40mm f2 prime. So as you can see, there's a huge difference, and this also gives you a few benefits. Now, one of the cool things about this lens is its build quality. We actually get some metal construction, unlike the S series prime, which is mostly plastic. Although the build quality on the S series is great, this actually feels really nice in the hand. We get a nice clicked aperture ring that goes from f2 all the way down to f16, or of course you can lock it off into automatic mode. We get a nice little lens hood here, which is awesome. It's not going to fall off by accident, but if you want to remove it, it clicks out nice and simply like that. We get a front lens cap and a 52mm front filter thread here. So if you plan on using this with NDs or polarizers or whatever, you absolutely can. The focus ring also feels really smooth, and I love the fact that it's separated from the aperture ring. Even though this is a small lens, you're not going to accidentally knock the aperture ring if you're going for the focus ring or vice versa. And it feels great under the fingers. There's no sort of scratchiness or anything like that. It feels like a far more expensive lens. Another huge benefit to this TTArtisan 40mm f2 lens is its weight. It comes in at only 167 grams, and I'll convert that to American on screen. And this is basically the ideal size and weight for the Lumix S9 in particular, or any camera if you just want to keep the size and weight down. But is it any good? Let's test it out. Let's see how this 40mm f2 lens compares up against the Lumix 35mm f1.8 at 1.8 to see whether or not there's a massive difference in the overall field of view and also the subject separation and background blur. This is the 35mm f1.8, and this is the TTArtisan 40mm f2 prime lens. I'm using exactly the same ND filter. It's an ND8, so it's a fixed ND. And you can get a good sense of how this compares up against the 35mm S series prime. Let's switch it back. And back to the 35mm f1.8. I'll put a side by side on screen so you can get a good sense of how they both compare. Let us know what you think in the comment section. All right, let's do some autofocus tests. So this is without any custom settings on the camera. This is just the wide area of the sensor with human tracking on. So it's detecting my face when I'm up close and detecting my body as I'm further back. I'm just going to jump out of frame here and jump back in. Have a look if it picks me up nice and quickly, and whether or not the transition is nice and smooth. You don't want it too jerky and you don't want it too slow. So there's a sort of finite line between good autofocus performance and pretty average autofocus performance. But let us know what you think of this. All right, we're going to speed things up. All right, let's speed things up. So this is still with the same settings as before. So all the default autofocus settings. Let's see how it handles this. I'll jump out of frame. I'll jump back in. Did it go to the background? It looks all good so far. I can't tell exactly how it's doing, but I'll comment on this in just a moment. What we're going to do now is speed up the autofocus system in the camera and try some new tests. Here we go. I've just set the autofocus speed to +3 and the sensitivity now to +2. Let's try this. I'll just try a couple of back and forth tests and see how well it works as I jump out of frame, jump back in. It actually looks pretty good. It might be a hair more sluggish than the Lumix S series primes, but I'll comment on that in just a bit. But yeah, for human tracking, I think if you don't push it too hard, it should be fine. Let's try the product showcase test, which is basically holding something over my face. This is my Austin keyring. I picked it up in Texas recently. It was an awesome trip. If you missed those videos, I'll link them up here. But this is just a quick test showing you that if you hold something up over your face, it's going to do the transition nice and smoothly, and then find my face instead of going to the background. So the autofocus system seems to be doing a really solid job here. Yeah, if there's any issues, let me know in the comment section, but it looks pretty good on the selfie screen. One of the big compromises usually with less expensive lenses is that they generally have more focus breathing, and this is how much the edges of frame kind of zoom in and out as you pull focus from infinity to minimum focus. It does suffer from some focus breathing, but I don't think it's as bad as other lenses that I've tried, even more expensive ones. So it's doing a good job. The focus pulls are a little slow here, but it's definitely working, and if you like that sort of cinematic, slow focus pull, then I think you'll get a kick out of it. This is with all the settings or custom autofocus settings back to default. Now, while you won't want to vlog with this lens due to the focal length being way too tight, what you can do though is use it with the E-stabilization in the Lumix S9 or any other camera that has it, allowing you to get this level of stabilization, which is fantastic. So this is with the E-stabilization set to standard. I'm not doing anything to this in post-production. I've got a selfie stick, which is something I wouldn't normally do, but you can get a good sense of the kind of stabilization you can expect from this in combination with these cameras. Here's a quick 2-in-1 test for you. I'm using IS Boost. This is all done handheld here. And I've also set the linear focusing mode within the camera to on. So now I'm able to pull focus with the focus ring nice and smoothly, repeatably and reliably. And it works beautifully. No problems going between the background, the foreground and all that kind of stuff using the focus ring on the camera. And again, this is handheld. So yeah, the Stabe with the E-stabilization off and IS Boost on looks really solid. While the manual focus experience is great and it plugs into the linear focusing system on the camera, there's no autofocus manual focus switch on the lens. So I did find myself going into the menu, switching it over to manual focus and all that kind of stuff. Now, if you've got an S5 Mark II or X, it's not going to be a problem, but yeah, it's just something that I overlooked. I always end up using that switch on the lenses, especially with the S9, and there isn't one, so keep that in mind. Let's take a look at the Sunstar effect. Now, I've just taken off the ND filter so you can get a good sense of what's going on. There's definitely some relatively okay Sunstars about there, but once you allow too much light, you can see some huge flares on screen, especially at on the lower portion of the frame. So yeah, it's definitely not a deal breaker, but I just wanted to show you how it performs in this exact scenario. I did a photo shoot down at this lake and around the local area around my house here. I was able to get some really nice results from this lens and camera body combination. Continuous autofocus with animal tracking was a little bit hit and miss for photography, but when it comes to video, it does a pretty solid job as long as the subject isn't moving too fast. The bokeh or background blur quality looks fairly reasonable to my eye. It does look a little busy, but I'm not dissatisfied with this. Here's a photo shot at f2, and I've moved back a little bit more now so you can get a good sense of how the background blur changes depending on how close you are to the subject. Here's a few other photos taken with the Leica monochrome picture profile at the minimum focusing distance, and here the background blur actually looks quite smooth. I think the takeaway here is the background blur is quite nice, but it will vary depending on your scene. Now, would I recommend this lens for photography or if you've got a Lumix S9 or a smaller camera body? I would. The center of frame is nice and sharp. There doesn't seem to be too much distortion either, which is really cool. If you're looking for a budget everyday carry lens for something like a Lumix S9 or a smaller camera body, I think it's a really good pairing. As long as you don't plan on shooting towards direct sunlight, this lens will do a really solid job. I'm going to give you my final thoughts here on this lens. So I covered the pros and cons throughout this video, but I think the takeaway here is if you're shooting with a Lumix S9, you're looking for something smaller than the S series of primes, then your day is here. You can finally find a lens It's small with autofocus motors that isn't an APS-C crop lens, so that's fantastic. And it's affordable, and this would make for a great travel lens where you don't want to have to worry about bringing more expensive stuff with you. I don't think there's a huge compromise in terms of usability other than the fact there's no autofocus manual focus switch. And if you are shooting with an S9, that can be a little bit problematic, but if you're more of an autofocus shooter, then you'll be good to go. Experiment around with the different modes. I found the one area mode, the little box without the extra box around it, was the most reliable in certain situations, but face tracking for video and all that kind of stuff worked fine too. So just experiment around, it does a great job. I don't think the autofocus responsiveness is as good as the S series, but it does a solid job in not too demanding situations. Anyway, I hope this has been helpful. If you want to check it out, I'll link it below. Thanks to TTArtisans for sending this out, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.